What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Games Recap.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Larry Charles here, one half the team, bringing you this morning's show. Other half to my right, Mr. Brandon Pham.
Yes, of course, if you're joining us live, you already know that we are live on Twitch every day, 10 a.m. PST. And check out later if you do miss any part of this or want to catch up to tomorrow. You can go to our youtube.com/bootchamps to also check this out.
Yep, the archive.
Yes, and people have been asking, like, when are we going to get this in audio form? Well, we're building up to that. If you want to check us out on any podcasts, go to our patreon.com, as you can see here. And if you are listening to this on podcast, then
you're welcome.
We made it, dude. So before we go into this today's topic, it's going to be very singular. We do want to congratulate anybody that has made it into the business. Am I blocking myself?
No, I think the camera was autofocusing on your glass.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull it back. There we go.
Maybe at some point we're going to switch to that camera and figure out that auto exposure because it is annoying that it keeps refocusing every 2 seconds. But let's talk about today's topic, Larry. Are you ready, man?
Sure. Who's up to the bat? Who's up to the plate swinging the bat first? Trump. All right.
So this is not going to be political.
We just said off camera, let's not get political. And it's just funny.
It ain't political.
I know.
I don't care if you're for or against Trump. Yeah. But the tariffs itself is not... Right now, it is kind of pointing towards the consoles. Yeah. Right? But it's been something raised with anything imported from China when it comes to technology, right? Your iPhones or any of that sort.
A lot of the microchips or like internal components required to make some of these things that even if we make it domestically, because of that dependency, there's going to be a tax increase or there's going to be a tax on that thing getting made.
Yes. And I remember David Chappelle kind of making a joke about this, saying, he's like, do we really need to... Do you want to put phones together? It's like, I don't want my phone to be $2,000. Let's just keep it over there, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of on the fence with this. I'm not exactly like completely on Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo side saying like, yeah, man, what are you guys doing? You're going to increase the parts over here. Because in the long term, it is true. I do see it on the other side. It's like, if everything is being made in China, imported in, what are the ramifications of that? Like, there's no skills. It is a certain type of technology and skill set to understand how these things are put together. Yes, anybody of that age group that would be working in those factories, how is your phone being made? They probably have no idea. Yeah. And to be honest, if you go ask anybody random in China, they probably don't know. But they have a better understanding because maybe their relative or someone is working in those factories and everything.
Well, the thing about me when I think about this is like, who are you really trying to please? When you say like, oh, I'm keeping jobs in America, it's like, all right, so you're gonna bring let's just use the iPhone example. So you're gonna bring iPhone manufacturing production internally to America domestically, right? Or you're gonna, because of tariffs, force Apple. This is all hypothetical, but Apple's now forced to do that in country domestically. And so let's go with Dave Chappelle saying, oh, $2,000 for your iPhone. So the trade-off is we've created about 3,000 jobs, right, to make the new iPhone internally in America and say like, oh, we've homegrown to then make the price of the phone double for everyone in America and worldwide who wants to buy it, right? So like, is the 2,000 jobs worth every single person now paying an extra $1,000 who does want to buy an iPhone? That's the way that I look at that, the economics of that. And so I can clearly see why consumers would be like, hell no, especially the companies that are, trying to make this consumer-based product, because they know that like, okay, levying that tax is going to make the product cost go up because obviously the corporation doesn't want to absorb the cost.
Yes.
They're going to put it on the people who spend the money. And therefore now the people who spend the money are going to like, what the hell? Xbox next? $730 before I buy a game? Microsoft, I'm not paying that. Like, they'll get mad at Microsoft, not get mad at the actual economical situation.
Yeah. I come from the standpoint of the technological warfare, right? The future of countries being strong or not, and of course everybody's marching towards world peace and everybody working together to better the human race, right? That ain't the case right now. I mean, there is a slightly competitive edge that China has over us. everybody, when they talk about countries, it's not about who has the biggest muscle. Of course, military plays a part of that.
Yeah.
But it's about AI,
Yeah.
and whoever has a lead in AI has a lead in countries' well-being in the future. It's AI and then space, right?
Well, we got Space Force.
Well, you say Space Force,
just so you know.
But China, all these other countries are landing people on the moon now, and they're fastly, putting a lot of the resources behind that.
Yeah.
We have NASA, sure, but they're dwindling down in terms of at least the tax pay money, and we're relying mostly on private organization, which is like an actual innovative way to go about it. To have SpaceX and Bezos' company to kind of drive us forward.
That's the interesting thing that I am noticing, and I'm even writing a game kind of that touches on this point, that like corporations are actually setting themselves up to be foreign policy leaders because they have resources and capital, and they're actually doing the innovations that we as a society will need. Like, I'm actually really happy to see SpaceX looking at space exploration, both for like consumers, but then also just for like, hey, we're going to try to provide internet, or we're trying to, basically link the planet core itself, the Earth, to outer space, and then see what kind of opportunities exist there. Because NASA is not doing it as much as they used to.
Exactly.
They can't afford it.
And like, I feel the same. Anything what Elon Musk does, right? Like Tesla, for a long time was American engineered, obviously innovated, and it kept a lot of the manufacturing within the country. And it's only recently they're starting to look at Chinese.
Yeah, they have to.
They have to kind of grow and be able to meet up demands and do that. But there is a certain pride when it comes to technologically advancement to keep that technology within the country. And if we're exporting all our smartphones and everything, like China will have first dibs on like how they obviously making these, and then they give them an edge for their own product and thrive within their closed economy, right? Because everything that's over there that is their own technology is kind of like a copy version, because they kind of keep out.
They got the blueprints.
Exactly, they got all the blueprints. They keep out, basically ignoring all copyright laws. Make their own Google, make their own whatever that is succeeding here, because they have 1 billion plus people as a consumer market, and we only have at max probably 400 million. So you can see the discrepancy there. So it's not like these consoles are coming out with like patented technology. I mean, they're basically PCs in a box, right? For consumer level. But I can see why this being like such a huge $1 billion industry, that they're throwing tariffs on this to kind of like set the tone, but educate people. Hey man, this is a time where yes, we might be paying more internally, but the world isn't at a place where countries are working in harmony, right? Yet. And there is a certain advantage that we have to think about when it comes to the future of the nation and stuff. And space, AI, anything technology driven, I really do think it's somewhat, I'm leaning more towards like, I get it, why this is important.
So you're saying you understand why the tariffs, you're relating to why.
Yeah, well, because out of the 3 consoles, right, we have Xbox. That's the only American-made console.
Yeah.
So I understand the tariffs being kind of just pushing it away from just Chinese manufacturing, right? But like here, I let's switch to the article real quick. So let's see here. Graphic 2.
For me, I mean, my perspective on all of this, and again, I can probably do a little more research before I open my big fat mouth, but I get paid to do that anyway. So what I will say is, it's interesting to me because I have to try to find the dividing line between just bravado politics and actual like beneficial politics. You know what I mean? Where a tariff will feel like posturing in an attempt to gain more leverage between our country and another country, right? Like to kind of start forcing or imposing our will to get them to then basically react or be subservient in certain ways, or we will try to, I guess, we'll try to leverage this power to say like, hey, well, hey, all right, cool. You know, this is a great business. And, you know, obviously we provide a lot of your customers, gamers. Yeah. So now we're going to ruin a lot of that business opportunity because our relations are poor right now and we don't ally with you very well. So here, this is what I'm going to do to impose on you. Right. But there's a lot of stuff that we get, excuse me, that isn't being tariffed from that relationship between our two countries, where we look at import and export, where our imports will, if they start doing that to us, you know what I mean? We're going to feel the burn probably faster than they'll feel the burn.
We're going to feel like...
So if you just look at technologies like, oh, well, we're going to make it harder for you guys to make Xboxes. Like, all right, cool. We're going to make it harder for you guys to get rice. We're going to make it harder, you know, for you guys to get a lot of products that we're responsible for. You know what I mean? Some of the wood, some of the metals.
There's a lot of things. Like there's a certain retaliation that you will, if we do follow suit in this regards.
If I wanted to be your friend, right?
Yeah.
And I came to you and I was like, what's up, dude? Punched you in the chest.
Yeah.
How excited are you about maintaining a friendship with me? You know what I mean?
True.
I think that the developing nation of China, I don't see them slowing down. I definitely know that they have a lot of money and a lot of people who are in tech, and I see that prowess growing. Obviously, they have a huge amount of like low cost labor, and a lot of other nations go to China to get production. And sure, there is like blueprint rip off, and like they're going to reproduce your stuff anyway. But the amount of money that these corporations are making through those relationships is like by far, it's still worth the risk from what I'm seeing, because no one stopped going to China because they started ripping you off. They still go to China. They're just upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, corporations have no allegiance to whatever country they're originally from.
Yeah.
They look at the greens. I mean, that's the only color they care about. And they just make decisions off of that. So I think it is up to the individual country and government to kind of like, hey, there is a need for competitiveness between countries to kind of be able to check them. And China right now not only is being insourced and outsourced from the U.S., they're getting all types of business from all different countries. And so if we were to look at it as me kind of like building up your armor, and, you know, the infrastructure of the U.S. economy is kind of like all the jobs are kind of disappearing or either being automated or just being outsourced, right? You follow that chart, I can see why there are actions that needs to be done to kind of stop the bleeding, right? And we see it within our own game industry. You know, as a prop artist, that's a job that's being within the environment discipline is fastly becoming outsourced as a essential part of a AAA development. And that used to be a job that environment artists will come out of school to get into, and it is a necessary part to kind of build up to finally handle environment art. And I'm not saying that it's completely going to be disappeared. I don't think that's the case. There's always going to be a need for prop artists within a studio to at least manage the outsourcing, right? But compared to 10 years ago, where it used to be an essential part to the environment making process, now it's just only a few downsides to a few managers, and you can start seeing that within all parts. I don't think design will ever be outsourced, thankfully for you guys, but any part that they can cut off, they will do. And if we're going back to this subject about these console makers, of course, fighting and trying to like to defend their stance, of course, you know, we're talking about 20 plus years working with their manufacturers, investing a lot of money in these establishments in China to make sure that, you know, everything runs smoothly. Just look at Tesla, and, you know, it takes a while to build that up to be able to be profitable. And the console business itself is already, like the car making business, very minimum profit in the hardware and often at a loss for like the first 4 to 5 years. And they rely mostly on servicing and everything else, right? So they're trying to use the excuse that it's going to cripple the consumer in terms of like spending more money, but it most likely will cripple them first if they have to spend as much as like twice now to make one hardware to sell at a loss. And so it's going to be a diminishing industry.
I think
is what they're looking at.
I think, again, this just plays right in hand with us saying consoles are going to be dying very soon. You know, because you look at Stadia. Yeah. Stadia kind of ignores this business model.
Stadia is not even part of this conversation.
They don't even care. Fine. They're like, oh, well, we're handling all that. You just need to be able to access our network to play the game. Yeah. And I think that this even more so pushes the lever towards that kind of reality. But what I will say is tariffs imposed between two countries don't change the behavior of the corporation. The corporation says, we want to find the cheapest way to make this product, right? China's been tariffed. That doesn't mean stop subsidizing by outsourcing. That means stop subsidizing by outsourcing to China. Yeah. So now they just say, oh, well, how about Vietnam? How about Indonesia? How about India? How about one of these other countries? All right, we're going to pay 3 more cents per iPhone. Right. That's not as bad as paying 18, 20, 50, 90, yes. $200 more dollars.
And I think the government sees that as like obviously the next step for most corporations to fight back on this, and I think they're okay with that, to be honest, because they're trying to kind of like slow down China's progress in everything. Yeah. They are killing it with everything right now, and they have so much money kind of padding themselves up, and all the technology is going through the siphoning through them before hitting consumers. And so they have not just their own scientists and anybody that's working within the technology sector, they have the whole world pumping in all their resources and the best products through them. And so you can see how powerful they are over there in China. And China is still a communist country. You guys don't realize. I mean, they still censor whenever they feel censoring. It's not like a great solution or a model country, but in terms of generating the resources and income, and in the last 20, 30 years, that they've been insanely smart and like several moves ahead. And if anything, China is probably the closest to operate like a corporation than anybody else, in my opinion. Because of how it's their dictatorship.
The structure of works. Like a communist government seems. I could see the parallels between that and like obviously a CEO-run corporation, board of executives-run corporation, where mandates are created, passed down, and expected to be, executed and lived by. By employees, by countrymen. I can see that.
And if you look at all parts of their industry, and then we're just kind of slicing it to just entertainment because that's more closely related to us. If you just go outside of games, like their movie industry has become such a megalith. I mean, they've always been around ever since the Bruce Lee days, and made a somewhat of a notice, right, of saying like, hey, we're around and we produce great films. But it's now like a commodity for even U.S. films to make a present where they have to include a Chinese actor or location to be able to want to be in that market, because that's a huge hundreds of millions of dollars of blockbuster money that either equates or like, at least on the level playing field of the domestic sales of every movie that's being launched. And that's mostly because of them taking several steps ahead and thinking, how do we compete? And really gather all those resources.
I mean, it's smart, right? Because all those people in China still like to be entertained and watch movies as well, and they have enough disposable income that they can buy a movie ticket. It's not going to hurt you to write in 2-3 characters who, I hate to use the word, but kind of pander to that audience. It doesn't disrespect your art. It just means that you're trying to do something a little more economical and be a good business, make a good business decision. Like you look at World of Warcraft, the movie, domestically, I would say it was not successful. But China alone made that movie worthwhile, I think, 3 times over.
Just from the amount of people
that supported it in China.
And that turned a lot of heads, and executives in the entertainment industry are the exact same way, right? They only see green, and they don't care. And there is a certain danger to that, because if you as a nation don't really pay attention too much about having a country's competitiveness, and China's constantly thinking about that, how to like leverage themselves and be in a dominant position 20, 30 years down the line.
They're playing the long game.
Exactly. And what is the outcome of that? I mean, they're not gathering resources just to be on the tallest podium, right? I'm not exactly saying they're going to call a warfare or anything, but there is a certain competitiveness that we've lost, I think, in the U.S. When we're just exporting all the goods over there.
If I was China and I look at how they're positioning themselves right now, how I would play my chess pieces is becoming so integral in the success of other nations' corporations worldwide means that I'm directly related to the success of those nations' people, their jobs. Like, how many people do you think Microsoft employs? How many people do you think Sony, Nintendo, any of these major technological corporations employ? Not just from like the native countries of Japan, or wherever else those technologies may come from, Korea, like for Samsung. There's a lot of people domestically, even U.S., who work for Samsung, who work for Sony, who work for Microsoft, Nintendo, all of these technology companies. So when you start summing up all the hands that touch these products that go through China domestically, that's like you saying all those people are going to be without jobs, or, we're going to impact their lifestyle if things go bad. China knows this. So the more reliant they become for helping these other corporations do well, the less likely you're going to see other domestic nations or other nations want to attack or want to have a bad diplomacy with China. So therefore, China then becomes a powerhouse even further, not only with manpower, but just because of relationship power.
Yes.
That, oh man, they're untouchable now. Yeah. And I think that's
a monopoly.
Exactly. That's the route that they're going for as a superpower, is they're going to be integral in the success of not just other nations, but the corporations as well, which employ, just immense amounts of people. And there is no politician that will stand up in front of like 400,000 people about to lose their job and say, we need to be tougher on these people so that, the country benefits. And when they're like, no, because we are going to lose. We are going to be out of work. We are going to have X, Y, and Z happen to us. So I think it's pretty smart. It's like, it's Trojan horse style, growth, but that's
super.
It worked.
Asian,
it worked
Chinese,
then. It's going to work
attacks.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so that's why when I read this news and let's just read through this article because I think it's the sentiment through this article is kind of like broadened to other news outlet that I've seen about this. So if we're looking at this right now, this is from thenextweb.com, right? It's the most referenced read article about this topic. So, of course, the console makers are making a stance against this. They don't want to do this. And, of course, to make it relatable, they always say, we're going to be paying $840 million out of our own pockets. I'm not doing that. Come on, man. I'll just play on Stadia. Let's be real, guys.
But that's already an example of what I was illustrating earlier, is like we have the corporations now trying to levy against their own governments to try to keep
China doesn't have to even say anything.
Yeah, they don't.
The corporations are in their pockets, and they have all these lobbyists basically. There's so much power right now. Yeah. But China is the only one that can do this.
I'll say this: it's a pendulum swing effect. China, because of, I don't want to call it poverty, but you look at the quality of life. You look at how much money was needed to maintain at least minimum quality of life. Like societally accepted minimum quality of life in China versus America, let's say from 1970 till now. It's a skewed perspective, right? Over here, we have higher expectations. We are
on average.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas in China, they're like, I could live off $3-4 a day.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You ask somebody here to do anything for $4 a day that isn't under the age of 10 years old, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so the pendulum swing is now like, okay, well, we've created all these production jobs. We've got these people working in factories. We are a production powerhouse, and we're paying $4 a day. Corporations like, well, over there, actually, that makes sense. $4 a day is miserable here, but over there, like, we can see how it leads to a decent lifestyle.
Yeah,
I'm just paraphrasing here.
Right.
Pendulum swings that way. Now, other nations fall because we have people who are in production who aren't employed. We have our quality of life is going to drop. Now, this will not happen over 5 years, 10 years, but long-term fast forwarding, you're going to see quality of life in China rise. You're going to see their expectations and their social needs start to rise. Whereas then we potentially start to swim down into the like, oh, dang, I could use $4 a day in America. I don't have a house. I don't have constant food, but I have $0 a day. So I'll take the $4 a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's what we're seeing is this part happen now.
Yeah.
The rise of China and the fall of everyone else who's not doing cheap production.
Right.
But then, I don't know if I'll be alive to see this, but there comes the point in time where now China has replaced us as the like, oh, this is the great place to be. This is awesome. Look at my lifestyle. Look at all this money I make. And then we're third world for sure.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, no, we'll do it. Like, just pay us $4 a day. We're down. Pay us 4 yen a day. We're down.
We're in China's pocket in so many ways. Yeah. I mean, like I
think yen's Japanese. What's the...
Which one?
I just said a racist joke. I was trying to say, like, what's the China... I don't remember what their...
The yen?
No, isn't that Japanese? Yen is Japanese?
I think they do yen.
China does yen as well? I thought Japan does yen.
I think all the Asians do yen.
Yeah.
Let's look at this up.
It's not racist. It's ignorance. I didn't actually know the name of the currency. But anyway, so now we will be looking at taking the Chinese currency.
Yuan.
There you go. Thank you.
You're right. 15 cents.
I did win.
United States dollar. So 1 yuan is 15 cents of United States dollar.
Check that fact in 10 years. 10 years. Just
well, right now we're in their pockets, as in all the not a loan. What's the treasury?
The deficit.
The deficit is mostly bought by China.
Yeah.
So we owe China money if we're talking about ourselves as a nation.
Yeah.
And not only that, all the profits and everything that's being made, we're paying China.
Yep.
Like all the money goes through China, and this is just one country.
Yeah.
Imagine the whole world, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only the work that's going through them, but it's also the monetary value of everything is going through China.
Tariffs is a short-sighted view of trying to attack that problem. The real problem is just competitive. We're not competitive. So it's like you go to your son's basketball game and they say, hey, Brandon, your son Bruce on the Blue Dragons, you guys, so good. So every time you all score a point, we're only going to make it worth 1/4 of a point.
Right.
Whenever they score a point, it's going to be worth 1 point.
Yeah.
That's the new rule.
Yeah.
Like what? We're both playing basketball. We both have the same amount of people, the same positions.
Yeah.
My kids aren't older than theirs.
Yeah.
But look, it's just not fair.
Yeah.
That's like the tariff approach. That's what's happening here. And it's like instead, like, train harder, be better. Then you can beat them. We can beat China if we can outproduce them for cheaper. If we can't be cheaper, can we be faster?
Yeah.
If we can't be faster, can we be higher quality, significantly higher quality?
Right.
That's the triangle. And instead of attacking the other two things that we feel like we don't have control over, we're just trying to tax their points.
Yes. And I wonder if there are studies out there. I'll look something up while you talk.
Sure.
But if there are studies out there where, of course, if these people are in the assembly line, it's not like they're getting, not everyone is Einstein is able, everyone's kind of like working on a station in a small part of the process, right? But I can't help but think, but being around that, having relatives, friends kind of working in those factories, I know it's a horrible life because you're making $4 a day, but still being inspired by being around that will help kind of push the youth towards more in that direction, become manager of those factories, or like to me, it seems like a clear path because of them being relatively close to that industry. Where over here, where no one is really touching technology, unless we have like a very specific interest through our other means.
All of our blue collar stuff is based on hundreds of year old business models, or not business models, business markets. Yeah. Right. Coal, steel, iron, like metals, alloys, and things like
raw
that.
Materials.
Raw materials. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. Yeah. The development and exporting of like technological, components, we're looking at maybe the last 30, 40 years kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's why I feel like we're definitely not in a position right now to compete with them, because when you talk about blue collar work, you have steel workers, you have coal workers, you have all these people in industries that just in general, the world is starting to use less. Maybe not so much the construction stuff. I think raw construction materials is always going to be valuable. So those blue collar jobs are protected here. But like old coal, like when Trump was on that whole like, oh, I'm going to save the jobs for the coal workers. Coal is clean coal and all that stuff. Yeah.
Come on.
China doesn't care about that. They're like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to keep working on these alloys for microchips, and we're going to keep giving you guys the cheapest to produce products because we're in a consumer-driven world right now. China is in prime position to just reap all the benefit.
Yeah, man. You got to look beyond. I'm sure there's some contractual agreements because these factories that they outsource are probably separate, right? It's not
Yeah.
like the factories that is producing all these Sony consoles the next day are making Nintendo consoles, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be like a differentiation, at least in the contract, saying
Yeah.
you can't work for a competitor if you're gonna, at least in this location. Right?
Well, I would imagine even if that was the case, they'd be like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, of course. No, it's very
completely lie to you
Chinese.
in your face.
There's got to be a part. I'm damn sure of it.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
part of the government that is solely looking at all these technology companies, competitors, essentially, looking at their best output. Right? They have their internal scientists in their country, in Korea, Japan, whatever, figuring out the best way, the cheapest way to produce, and they're like, all right, we got the blueprint. This
Yep.
is how you do it.
Yep.
And they kind of seed it through China, and China looking, all right, so everyone has a different way of doing this. Let's gather that.
Yep.
Let's do it our own way. What's
Yep.
the best way? Combine all the best efforts.
Yeah.
And I mean, competitors are doing this. Or they buy an Xbox, they can reverse
Take it apart,
engineer.
yeah.
But no one's doing that because it's the same box nowadays. But imagine beyond games, NVIDIA, AMD, like every technology thing is being exported to China to mass manufacture, but also going through a government arm to look at all the competitive edge that everyone has, and they're sourcing that into their own country, right?
Yeah.
And this is what we're already like 15, 20 years too late, right? But like this at least gives a pause to their production line. I mean, they already probably figured out a way around this as of right now. Don't believe Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony are just waiting to hear a response from the government. They already are thinking alternative ways to kind of still keep it cheap,
100%.
but just not go through China, right?
Games Pass.
Yes, but we're okay with that because as a nation, because we want to kind of stop the bleeding in my mind, because it is a very dangerous thought how we're so far removed from any of the products that's being made on how it's being made, right? It's not like every kid. I wonder the percentage of kids nowadays have the curiosity to actually open up a box and reverse engineer versus how it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, not like it used to. There's so many other
Right.
ways to, kind of get fascination.
There's so many distractions right now, right?
I see a lot less interest in math sciences for entertainment value.
Yeah, and
100%.
versus a kid or an adult who's surrounded by everybody doing this, and you're like, I wonder. I'm just gonna spend the time to look at this.
Well, you're right about that. The influence factor of proximity, especially between child-parent, huge.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody who has a kid, especially if the relationship is good, will see the kid trying to emulate or trying to do the things that they feel like are being subliminally taught to them by the parent. Even in the wild, like when you see cubs wrestling with each other, and we brought this up before, obviously that's play, but it's also war. It's just safe simulated war that when they become full-grown lions or full-grown tigers, whatever, they use those same moves, but this time the bite is real.
Yeah.
This time the pawing has the claws.
Yeah.
And so like you said, so if the kid is seeing their father be a mechanic or being an engineer or like something along assembly line worker, but they know that that's what you do to pay for things and to bring money home, and that's how they work their job, you might see the kid pick up interest, or at least because of the exposure, there's a higher chance they know about that as an opportunity and they go into it.
Yeah. And the parents will also like, hey, this is the future.
Yeah.
This is what China is positioning themselves to. You need to learn how to do this. At least be a manager of the factory, but maybe create something on your own because we're being piped into all the best of the best ways to do these things.
Plus,
With many opinions on how to do it, and now we can come up with our own way. And this is where I feel, taxing on these corporations will definitely tax on our
they're
wallets,
just going to put
right?
it on the consumer.
There's no doubt about that.
That's the first
That's
thing they
being
do.
passed through. But there is a certain part where you got to... This is where the capitalism, I think, within a country, although it has its good part to be competitive, where it gets kind of muddy because you kind of start removing yourself from your allegiance to where you live.
Okay.
And you kind of, I think less of being a group than an individual, right? And there's pros and cons to both sides, of course. But this is where I think if everybody over in China is kind of thinking 20 steps ahead, and how to be a powerhouse, at some point we're going to be allegiance to China in whatever they decide, and everything that we do job wise. And reliability is, it's the same way we work in an outsourcing studio, right?
Sure.
I'm not hating anybody that works in an outsourced studio, but everybody's preference is to work at the main first party studios when you're working in the game industry or any industry, right?
Yeah.
I imagine myself being in the reverse role all the time, where I'm getting creative decisions from an outsourced studio, from a primary studio,
told to you,
and then I have this little room to be creative, but not really, and I'm just doing the work like an assembly line. I mean, that is a very realistic scenario for us 20 years down the line for all this. One day, it'd be cheaper to make things here.
Yeah.
And do you want to have that?
Well, here's
a possibility.
Here's the thought that I think about when I think about how these foreign politics play out. And again, I like the time scale. I don't worry about myself living to see it. I just worry about what I think the inevitability is. And assuming China does become worldwide superpower times 10, and now every country is like dependent upon them for the survival of themselves, their corporations, and GDP related items, because they're like, hey, we need your components for everything that we do. Do you want to be the country that was like, hey, China, cool, so happy that you are developing. Let's work on increasing prosperity between our nations. What can we do to aid you? Because China hasn't been running around trying to start any wars that I know of over my lifetime currently. I haven't seen them send troops anywhere to, like, especially to attack us, right? It's always been like lean on diplomacy from USA, like we put our weight on them, you know what I mean? Because we're worried about them doing it to us later on. Yeah. But let's assume that does happen. Who's China's favor going to go towards? The nations that sent them tea crumpets and celebrated with them, or the nations that tried to hold them back the whole time? Yeah. Like, so which side of that fence, I guess, do you want to be on if it's an inevitability? Yeah. Right. And so that's where I worry, is like, well, I don't think our foreign politics are going to be appreciated very much if we're tariffing them and we're continuing to try to be a pain in their ass. Now, we're not blatantly holding them back, spitting or disrespecting them as a nation, but we are making certain things complicated for them because of fear of growth from their nation and how that would affect, or in turn remove power from us. And so there's many ways to skin that cat, but the thing that I worry about is like, oh, I remember you, USA.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. Man. But I mean, what's your overall feeling about this? Do you think this is a smart move
to tariff China for
just, well, let's keep it within games, right? Like the consoles.
Okay, if I'm just looking at games and looking at the life cycle that I know on a macro level, on a micro level, because we're taking a subset of all industry, we're just talking about games. It does not help the game industry whatsoever. Those corporations are not excited to sell an expensive product more expensive. Like, even without the tariffs, for the last 10, 15 years, consumers complain about price points, right? The sales of consoles don't really start to take off until the console has reached the point where the saturation of products produced versus products sold brings down that cost, right? When the PlayStation starts to hit the $299, the $199 Christmas time, that's when you really start seeing people invest in, because that initial like $400, $500 is hard to chew on. Yeah. But the like $249.99 Xbox One right now, I bet you is selling way more than the $499 Xbox when it originally came out. So they're already having pricing difficulties. You know what I mean? The last thing they want to do is try to find a way to add debt economics to their business model and say, we got to make the customer pay for this. We got to make the customer pay $700 now. I think all that we're going to see out of this is not avoidance, but abandonment of console and a further push towards, well, you know what? All these other people making devices are making them capable of running, decent looking games at 60 frames a second. If we're a video game company and we want to sell entertainment and experiences, the console used to be the gatekeeper to those things. That may not be the case anymore. Let's explore, like Sony or like Stadia is doing, see if we can just give the accessibility some other way and still provide the gaming experiences. Then we avoid selling $500 consoles altogether. Maybe we can save that money. Maybe we can invest in more games or more studios and not have to pay for consoles whatsoever.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, man. Like, obviously, we're continuously having to buy consoles is going to hurt us because they're already selling at a loss, and it's going to force them to think alternatives. I mean, they're not going to go that far. They're probably just going to outsource to Indonesia or whatever, just to avoid the China route. if they have to, right? But they're still fighting this to see if there's like most likely going to be a compromise. I don't know how far this will go.
We'll see.
Yes, but I mean, it supports what we've been thinking about the console business for a long time. It's fastly being outdated, and Stadia is one of the first steps to kind of focus on the software. Xbox is already acknowledging themselves. They're focusing on Game Pass. I mean, this is a transitional period. That's the only reason why they're coming up with an Xbox. PlayStation obviously is the leader in the console business, so they're going to continue that. Obviously, why fix something that's not broken? And Nintendo found a niche with the handheld market. They've always been dominated in that, and they've combined their console with handheld business. And there's every reason for them to continue the console. But if push comes to shove, right, I have no problem thinking that they're going to come up with an alternate solution that's going to make sense to them and for consumers. So for me, this isn't such a big hit as they're making it out to be. They want to avoid it because they already have plans in the next 5-10 years to keep the gravy train going, right? They don't want any upset, and they're banding together. They have the same message. But, this is just corporations kind of having no allegiance to any country, and they don't want to, they don't care, right? It's kind of like war where arms dealer kind of sells to both sides, right? They have no dog in this fight to any country, so they don't care about that. For right now, though, they're kind of like, of course, on China's side because all their operations are over there. But this is where China's so smart. They planned for this. Yeah. I mean, they have steps 1 through 10 of when U.S. starts to smarten up about this and how this will like kind of destabilize a country by exporting all their technology basically to us when they've finally decided to do something. It'll be too late. But we have steps in place to, we have corporations in our pockets to fight for it. We don't have, China has not said anything that is making newsworthy, right? It's all these console guys kind of standing up for them. And the effect, I think, I don't know what the consensus is right now on the consumer side. Obviously, we haven't talked to anyone about this. This is just really off the press. Yeah. But even when I'm reading the articles on it, it doesn't seem like it's leaning too much either or. It's just covering the fact that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo doesn't like this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, as a corporation, their job of protecting the black and protecting the shareholders' interests, obviously that's the first step they would take is to lobby against. I guess where my crystal ball, theory crafting is happening is it's more like I already thought we're towards the end of consoles as a thing anyway, right? To now see the government trying to step in and levy tariffs in this way, excuse me, I'm getting a little sick. I don't necessarily know where that buck stops because will there be another target after China? Because if we move to Indonesia, now is Indonesia going to be like, oh no, we can't have them making competitive products?
China is but I know what you mean, right?
So I can't trust that I have control over who and when the taxing is going to happen, obviously. Yeah. But I also feel like I don't know if I'm going to see an Xbox 6 and I don't know if I'm going to see a PlayStation 6 in general. So I know 100,000% that the companies responsible for bringing us these consoles are already at least 3 to 4 years into the development or to their lateral plan. Yeah. Lateral plan meaning if we had to abandon consoles, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What are we going to roll out? Yeah. Those R&D departments are hard at work already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go over to our Twitch section. If you guys have opinions, go ahead and voice them. We will read them because we are very open to discussing this. Obviously, Larry and I have our very funneled perspective on things.
Our
viewpoints, right? But we welcome anybody to talk. So, Etchy Tubby, thank you for joining us. He mentioned China has a workforce willing to suffer and make less for the greater good of their government, in quotes, right? American workforce feels like they're old for everything. Second, they spin off their couch.
They what off their couch?
The second they get off their couch, they feel like they're being old something, right? It is a sentiment that is true. Yeah, this is a classic East versus West attitude about China is all about like for the greater good of everyone.
Well, they have to be.
They have to be,
which
right?
is the like you go against the government, right? Like,
yes,
it's different.
They're very
there than
nationalistic.
here. Yeah,
and it's been like that for centuries,
Yeah.
right? Not just the last 50 years.
That's how it
American. I mean, we have a capitalistic competitiveness among everybody, and everybody's always trying to climb the ladder, and so that, of course, is me versus you attitude. And yes, I think it'd be a lot harder for Americans kind of stand together to look 10 years down the line when obviously they look around their situation and it's not as good as they think it should be, right? I think that's a very global general attitude about Americans.
And there's a lot of intricacies at play here with why we see attitudes the way that they are.
Yeah.
And like why we as a country may not come together as easy as China as a country. But I'm going to generalize here and say when I think of China as a country and I think of all the groups that make up China, I would say China is 99.8% Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas America, I would say you start to say like
It's very
28% white or, 31% Hispanic and then like 11% African American.
You say 28% white, they're already upset.
But you see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
Like
there's a lot of different
these
cultures.
demographics are way different.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing empathy issues. We're like, oh man, this person got shot and killed. Well, what did they do to deserve it? Right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
these
yeah,
are
yeah.
this is the conversations that Americans are having with
Exactly.
each other. I'm assuming that's not the same case in China. I can see their country as a nation easier to band together because one, they're all related, still generalizing, but two, the way that their government's structured is you get told what to do quite often.
Yeah.
And the penalties there for going against your government way different than the penalties
I mean,
here.
you got to factor into the brainwashing
Yeah.
game over there. It's really huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the anti-government sentiment is non-existent, I think, in a large part over there because, China is killing it. I mean, they're doing well. It's hard to argue that the choices they've made as a country is working against them, but they've been flourishing with their economy, technology, everything over there. I mean, they're going to space, for God's sake. I mean, everything has been working, so it's hard to kind of take their word and be like, you're bullshitting me. As in the U.S., you see all these problems and jobs being exported and people are just having a tough time getting through everyday life. It's very easy to kind of point at the government as what's going on. And then you look within the government, I mean, there's a lot of, where's my tax money going? And there's just
Space
so
Force.
much that attitude stems from the streets to the White House, right? Like everybody's just in it for themselves. And government is supposed to represent the greater good, but if we're just staying within the technology front, net neutrality was a clear indication of like, fuck you guys. This is not a public opinion. This is because we want to be able to tax extra gigabytes and your home internet that used to be free for all, right? I got we're streaming a lot more now, right? And my home internet, and it tells me like, oh, you're at 85% internet usage. So after you get a certain, we'll add 50 gigabytes for $10. Like, what the fuck? Like, I've never in my life thought I would see that day where I'm being charged extra gigabytes for internet that I'm so accustomed to, and I'm the cheapest motherfucker out there when it comes to paying extra when it used to be free, right? So these are the type of things that I see when it comes to like American sentiment towards for the greater good. It's just from the bottom to the top, everybody and everywhere have been telling you in your life that
Capitalism.
It's capitalism, man. Be competitive. The government, the politician that's supposed to protect you, he's in it because he's winning it. And if you have something to say, do something about it. I mean, that is the cool thing, that we have the freedom to kind of stand up and oppose. But we're, what do you call it? It's not de-step where when someone's watered down, where
like, so it's been cut. It's been I know what you're trying to say. So
that you're so
it's on the tongue. Okay,
it's
so
like 1984 shit, right? So you're like
desensitized.
I guess
when you're
something along those
the purity
lines.
is lessened.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like 100% grade. It's
like you're
stepped on.
You're not like
as
100% yourself now, right? It's you've been desensitized to a point where, as a person, you don't know where you stand. You don't have the ability to make the calls that you would if you had a full education on everything that's happening around you. So this plays a part in all the exports we're doing. You know, I have no idea how to put an iPhone together. I'm sure I can YouTube it and everything, but it's so far removed from my everyday life. It's idiocracy, right? It's. I feel like as a nation we're getting dumber on the essential parts of the future, the technology front. Although we have like the best companies in the world, can we keep saying that 10 years down the line?
No.
Are we going to have Google, Tesla, and Facebook that is American grown? 10 years down the line, are we going to still continue to be the dominant force of that?
I say the best barometer for that is look at where they recruit talent now. Look at their leadership positions and just see if they're domestic or not.
Yeah.
And that's not to be like racial or discriminatory. I just literally mean like see where the talent was acquired from. That could be a telling source of where talent is being produced. You know what I mean? Are we domestically hiring leaders, or are we like, hey, here we've brought in, you know, Sanjay because he's qualified, he's excellent. Like, no disrespect to Sanjay, but that to me is like a barometer of like, oh wow, like did we have an alternate version or a competitive version that was, you know, domestically produced? If the answer is no, then look at that. If the answer is yes, then okay, cool. Like we're still in the game. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I mean, I think that's part of the danger that everyone's kind of worried about. And dude, I am like the dumbest person when it comes to politics because I pay no attention to it. I think it just feels like it's the same people on both sides just talking about the same thing. But for me, when it comes to this type of stuff, trying to get ahead of what's I'm seeing as an industry and I've experienced, you know, I work with outsourcing teams within the game industry, and yes, most of them are Chinese. So I've had my experience with them, and I've seen a person right next to me doing the same job I've done, but like cents on the dollar, right? 15 cents to the dollar. And it's literally like that. And it's like a clear eye opener of why do they need me to keep being paid at this level? The only difference is I speak English better than this guy. But we look the same. But like that's the reality, and that to me is a physical manifestation of what everyone's worried about. Being outsourced and not being competitive. If we're a capitalist country, you know, keep it competitive within our country. You know what I mean? Don't just go for the cheapest way to do things, just so that you're a step ahead a little on the other company. It's like look at ourselves as Americans, and try to help each other out.
And I think that's our biggest problem that I think our current government is probably just fine with. Is that because of the way that, you know, we're all kind of disenfranchised, because of the way that we are bickering and fighting on any sort of polarized issue, like having marches where we beat the crap out of each other because one side is neo-Nazi and the other side is obviously not neo-Nazi, or, you know, or racial clashes, or like all of these reasons why people are willing to trade blows with other American citizens is the biggest thing to overcome if there's ever going to be a point in time in our history anymore where we're like, hey, we as the people are all going to suffer from X, so let's fight against X. Yeah, but you're an N-word, so me first. You know what I mean? Like, it's corporations like looking at us unionizing, they know that that is working in their favor. The governments being overthrown know that us unable to like see eye to eye and respect each other as a nation of individuals is why there's no fear that they will ever be uninstalled or canceled, as the kids say these years. So.
No, I think there's a bigger issue at hand here, and I think anybody is a gamer right now. Don't look at it as just like I'm going to be spending how much more to buy a console. If you're American especially, you got to really look at the bigger picture here and look beyond of just why Sony and Microsoft is actually on your side. It's not true, man. These are corporations, and we forget that. And we are a $1 billion+ industry. Everybody wants a piece of this. For the government to finally take notice and be like, holy crap, how many of these consoles, how many games get sold? We're making a mark everywhere now. Everybody from the movies, from the game sectors, of course, and anybody outside of our game industry, like the enterprise industries, it's great. They're finally paying respect to us. We used to be teased by everyone, but now everyone's respecting us. But to what end, right? Like, we need to really be careful about these stuff because it will affect us. You think if China completely controls everything that we're going to be kosher, right? You're not going to enjoy console when China tells you and be communist within your country and stuff. There's bigger things than just playing games. So to me, that represents a lot of that.
Well, what I can say is if you're interested in studying more or being able to better predict how these things may play out, just take some time to study macroeconomics, maybe watch a couple of YouTube videos to just get your mind thinking down that path and seeing how the tail end of the dominoes start to fall. So that's the way I kind of piece things together myself, is like studying macroeconomics. So
all right, that concludes our hour. Thank you for joining us, and Larry's gonna see us out.
Yeah, man. So when you go to the barbershop, they cut your hair, you put your hat back on. I think I said that before, but consider yourselves recapped.